My next guest is a local author, magazine editor, and an assistant professor of creative writing at Seattle University. His new book, 3 Alarm Fire, is a collection of short stories that explore the complexities of our emotions with dealing with very modern issues. Juan Carlos Reyes, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, welcome back. You know, you've been here before. It's exciting.
That's right, that's right.
And so why did you decide to tell each of these stories through a lens of a different person?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things about how I approach the way I understand life is different situations, different traumas, different tragedies, and the aftermath of that. And each one of these situations has a different character or a different narrator because they're all such different moments of aftermath. So for example, there's one story where there's just a couple teenagers on a date. And they get distracted and they get stopped by the police. What happens next, right? There's another story where there's an online troll who decides to turn on his camera for a live feed after a school shooting. And so thinking about these various moments that we go through in American life and what they mean in terms of our encounters with each other afterwards.
Wow, incredible. And did you put in any stories from your own personal experiences as well?
Yeah, that's always a fascinating question because I think every writer will tell you that there's a kernel of fact in every fiction they write. And so there's always some overlap, right? Whether it's a moment I was witness to or a bystander in, or a person I was deeply familiar with, or just these feelings of hope and confusion, or sort of like solitude and intimacy. A lot of this stuff is familiar to me, and I don't think I would have been able to get at some emotional truth if they weren't deeply familiar to me.
That's so profound. I love that. And you tackle some heavy topics in this book, but there is an underlying theme of finding hope, which I love. So was that intentional or just where the stories took you?
Both, right? Because I think I'm a hopeful person, but with like an asterisk, right? Like I am an actively hopeful person because I don't imagine that we'll be sitting like kumbaya with each other, right? Anytime soon.
Okay.
But there's a sense of just like faith and just like even luck, right? That there's some work that happens to be hopeful. And I love that sense of active hope that all these characters represent because it takes effort and it takes work to be in community with each other. And I love that aspect and capturing that in stories. And
how do you put that effort in? And any advice to other people, I guess? Is it learned with that hope, you think?
Yeah, it's a constant practice, right? Like in the community, right? Whether it's on campus where I teach, in Seattle, where I live in Kent, Washington, right? I'm kind of always volunteering, always sort of like exploring relationships, sort of in friendships, right? And thinking, okay, how can I be there for somebody else? And a lot of these experiences, especially sort of these interactions that I have with friends and family, they all find their way into the book or into a story eventually.
So great. And that theme of hope might be pretty important right now with election season coming up, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. Do you think that's timely with its release?
Oh, absolutely, right. I think one of the really cool moments that we had sort of on the back end of things with the publisher is sort of realizing sort of like the overlap here, right? This book comes out formally next Tuesday, big launch party at Elliott Bay Book Company, and election day is 2 weeks later. And so there's so much about this that is about active hope, right? There's so much about how we vote sometimes that feels like that's like the end of an action. I know how I'm voting, but I also don't fool myself. I know that there's always work after the fact, that my hope is that with my vote, I get to put out a fire. But there are a lot of fires around us. And so hopefully in my work in community, in friendship, in relationship, in sort of the literary world, I'm always sort of active enough that I am helping others and always sort of finding a way to step in.
Definitely. And what are you working on next? We have to know. I know this hasn't even formally come out, but what else?
Always sort of like that quintessential question to every writer. So before the beautiful journey of this story collection happened, and I was approached by Hinton Publishing, right, the publisher in town, I was working on a novel. So I'm actually really excited to get back to it. Amidst sort of supporting this book and being out there, right, and sort of making the rounds, I'm excited to get back to that novel, right? I'm excited to get back to this sort of this really fully fledged out story that is just one that I get to sort of invest in over time.
What a tease. We love it. Thank you so much for sharing this amazing book and more of your work to come. So Juan Carlos has a book event, like he just said, to celebrate the release of 3 Alarm Fire. It's next Tuesday, October 22nd at Elliott Bay Book Company.